The transfer window in the Premier League and other major European leagues closes on Monday, the 3rd of February. Manchester City have been the busiest English team in the window so far, signing 3 players. Other clubs that you would say are probably in need of reinforcements have not been that active. Spurs, of course, have only signed Antonin Kinski. Mark, you've written a piece with our scouting expert, Tor Christian Carlson, on some of the number 9s that could move in the remainder of the window, and I need to start with Dominic Calvert-Lewin because you are suggesting that Manchester United's cure, the panacea, the man who can restore them back to the big time, is Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
Rest in peace, your mentions.
Need a bit of context here, don't we, I think? So, I've worked with Tom. We've obviously, I think there are 3 clubs that really need a striker in this window. A lot more than 3, but 3 desperately need one. Is Arsenal, as we know, need someone to put the ball in the back of that. Man United, as we really know, watching them play. And PSG, who are down to Gonçalo Ramos now because Colin Moane has gone to Juventus. So, the piece was basically, in an ideal world, if clubs were able to buy strikers, what would they go for? And there's 3 tiers. There's the top level strikers like Osimhen, Gyökeres, Sesko that a lot of clubs are looking at and would do a deal for in the summer, but can they get them now? And the likelihood is probably not. Although certainly Gyökeres at United or Arsenal. Certainly at United, I think he would be perfect because Amorim knows his style. He's worked with him at Sporting Lisbon. He's experienced. He would bring a lot more to the team than Xerxes and Højlund do. Arsenal a little bit different. I think we've discussed this before, that they weren't really overly keen on Gyökeres, but potentially Sesko, maybe Osimhen. Then there's a second tier of people like Jonathan David at Lille who could make a move. He's got 6 months on his contract. And then we've got to the final tier, which is players that are in a bit of a situation right now, either in terms of loss of form or contract situation, who would benefit from a move or could move. And that's where Dominic Calvert-Lewin comes in. So people don't laugh just yet. The situation is with Calvert-Lewin. He's 27 years old. He has 6 months left on his contract at Everton. Now, Everton, if they were a little bit further away from the relegation zone, I'd imagine would consider letting him go this window because it's the last chance to get some money for Calvert-Lewin, who in the past has been an England striker. At one time was Harry Kane's number 2. Very talented player, classic centre forward, great in the air, good touch. The problem with Calvert-Lewin is his fitness record. He doesn't stay fit long enough. But my point is that if you're Man United and you're in the last week of the window, you're desperate for a striker, you're not going to get Gyökeres, you're not going to get Sesko or Osimhen. Would Dominic Calvert-Lewin, with 6 months on his contract at Everton, be a smart move? Because neither Rasmus Højlund or Joshua Zirkzee are showing any signs of scoring goals. They've got 1 goal between them since the beginning of December. So my point is, yes, in an ideal world, Man United would spend €100 million on Victor Gyökeres from Sporting Lisbon, solve their problems. That's not going to happen. So they have to be smart. They have to look around what the options are. And I think Calvert-Lewin is injured again, unfortunately. We don't know how long he's out for. But if he was available and fit, I think for 6 months he would be a major upgrade on what United have got. The downside is Everton probably at the moment would balance out that if they could get 10 to 15 million pounds from him now, is it worth that, considering they might get relegated? So it's a tricky one for Everton.
Rob, now we've established that Mark's medically ill, can we talk about any kind of United incomings are presumably going to relate it to outgoings? The most obvious of which in the attacking department is either Garnacho or probably Marcus Rashford. And obviously Amorim's been quite negative about Rashford again. See Mark quizzing him after the Fulham game. What have you made of his latest comments, and are we any nearer to a resolution in terms of Rashford finding a new club?
And I think what you learn from Mark's interaction with Amorim after the Fulham game is that there is probably no way back now. There was a suggestion, Amorim has kind of been treading a fine line with the Rashford thing, and there was a kind of school of thought that maybe he gets to the end of the window, no one can afford to take his wages, he stays, and then slowly he gets integrated back into the first team squad. I think if you reach a point where you're suggesting that you would rather play your 60-year-old goalkeeping coach instead of Marcus Rashford, would suggest that his time at Man United, at least under Amorim, has been and gone. I think we're in a stage now where United are going to have to be quite flexible and finding an exit route for him, because it's already overshadowed quite a lot of Amorim's time at Man United, and if he was to be here after the deadline, it would carry on because people like me and Mark and other journalists are going to keep asking him.
Can I just jump in there? I mean, obviously, I think what he said about Rashford on Sunday, I think was out of order, actually. I think he's quite right to say that he needs to play better and needs to concentrate better and focus better and live his life better, but to say you would rather play your 63-year-old goalkeeping coach was a humiliation for Rashford. And it was too strong, and I can't imagine people at United upstairs are thinking, well done, Ruben, because what you've done there is you've basically halved his value. Marcus Rashford's value. And you basically said to any club that wants to take him, we're so desperate to get rid of Marcus Rashford, we'll let him go for any contribution to his wages. Now, United won't say that publicly, but what Ruben Amorim said has basically burnt through any prospect that United could get a reasonable fee for Rashford or get some club to pay a significant chunk of his wages, because he's clearly not got a future there. So any interested club would be thinking, well, why should we offer you half his wages? Because you don't want it.
For anything else, that United have, you touched on it there, that United need outgoings before they start bringing players in. Anthony's gone to Real Betis. Betis are going to pay the majority of his wages. It gives United a little bit more flexibility ahead of the last week of the window. Their priority, they don't score goals, but their priority is to sign a left wing back to help this implementation of the 3-4-3 system. Their first choice is Patrick Dorgo at Lecce. They haven't been able to agree a deal so far, although they're not that far away in terms of valuation. United have got an option, possibly with Alvaro Fernandez, an academy player who went to Benfica, who's done quite well at Benfica. United have got a buyback clause in his contract worth about, I think it's 18 million euros, which is valid until 2026. So a deal that could be done quite quickly because that's already a pre-arranged fee in that deal. So as a fallback, it's not bad. It's all about budget, though. It's about budget and finding some kind of leeway to get players out and to bring players in who can actually help Amorim right now.
There is a bit of interest from Italy, potential interest in Højlund and Xerxes.
So I was going to mention that. You've obviously mentioned those two players in your piece. I mean, do you and the interest from Italy? I mean, do you think it's realistic that it's possible that? I mean, how? Obviously, at the moment, we don't know if Rashford's going to leave. But could they realistically lose Rashford and one of Xerxes and Højlund as well?
Well, Rashford's already a non-person anyway. If he stays, he's not going to play. I think Amorim made that clear. So I think Rashford you have to discount. But I don't think Højlund or Xerxes can feasibly leave until they've got somebody in. But that's the catch-22 United, isn't it? Because they can't get somebody in until somebody goes out. But the interest from Italy is because AC Milan are looking for a centre-forward. They're looking at the guy at Feyenoord, Jimenez, who's done really well, but Feyenoord are doing well in the Champions League to the point where they might not need to let him go this window. So Milan are looking for a forward. Juventus also are interested. Juventus have been looking at Calvert-Lewin as well as Xerxes. I mean, listen, Højlund and Xerxes did relatively well in Italy, so they have got a reputation for scoring enough goals to justify a move. But I do think that I don't see United letting any of those go until the last couple of days of the window, because they can't do it before somebody comes in, and that is the catch-22.
Well, surely also, though, I mean, the general assumption seems to be that United will try and do Gyökeres in the summer, right?
Yeah.
Because of Amorim.
Mm-hmm.
So what are they going to do for 6 months? They can't. What are you going to say to a strike? I mean, I know you're talking about Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and that's where that does make sense in theory of a short-term option. But what are they going to do in terms of, if they're thinking Gyökeres for the summer, how can they go and get a forward now who knows he's going to be second choice in 6 months' time?
Well, that is a good point. And look, the appeal of Man United is still there, but you could go to Man United and raise your profile and get a move elsewhere. The problem with United is they keep doing this. Odion Ighalo, Wout Weghorst, Edinson Cavani, they keep making short-term buys, but I think we've got to the point now where they really, really need somebody to help Højlund and Xerxes or improve them. So whoever goes in there, whether Gyökeres comes in the summer, they still need other strikers around it. They're basically operating with no strikers at the minute because the two they've got just aren't good enough. So Højlund, you have to feel sorry for him in a way. He's 21 years old. He's being asked to do the job of an experienced forward. He's got no help around him. His confidence is clearly on the floor, but there's no experienced player that can help him along.
It was telling it at Fulham that Amorim was asked about the final week of the window, and he said the main goal is to not repeat the mistakes of the past. And he's obviously talking about players like Anthony, who's having to disappear on loan somewhere, having paid £80 million. That suggests to me that they're going to be overly cautious and not panic, or try not to panic in terms of getting someone in for 6 months. And if it means, running with a really small squad for 6 months and having an absolute disastrous end of the season, in Amorim's mind, if that puts you in a better place in the summer to do what you actually want to do, then he is on board with that.
It's interesting because I think Arsenal are in a very similar position, but for a very different reason. I mean, they're obviously going for the league. Nobody thought that City would fall away as they have, but if they were to drop, everybody thought Arsenal would be the ones that would capitalise, and they're clearly in a position a week out where they're short in the forward line. And from what I'm told, their preferred choice of Benjamin Sesko is not available this month. There seems to be a very, very small chance that they could get him out of Leipzig in the final week.
The only thing I would say on that is, if United's season, in theory, is already over because they've had an absolute nightmare start, I think you've been on the pod before that Arsenal, in theory, are within touching distance of a first title for how long. Their motivation to not to panic but to do something quickly is greater than United's.
Yeah,
United can write the season off. They can just go for the Europa League
whereas Arsenal need to seize the moment, I think,
Yeah.
and that's they're under a lot of pressure, I think, to do that in this final week.
There's Jonathan David at Lille. He's got 6 months on his contract, but he's a kind of he's an off the number 9 striker, but he's a guy that may suit Arsenal in the sense that he can play in the hole, and he's got 6 months on his contract, so it's a relatively inexpensive deal. If Sesko's not available, Osimhen's interesting because he's on loan at Galatasaray, but there's a bit of doubt as to whether a club could buy out his loan. So United did it with Weghorst a couple of years ago. He was at Besiktas, and they paid to buy him out of his loan from Burnley. Potentially, Osimhen could be available if a club is prepared to say to Napoli, we'll buy out his loan with Galatasaray and compensate Galatasaray.
Well, Chelsea were the ones that spent the final sort of hours of the summer window trying to get Osimhen over the line. So I don't know whether they could be in a scenario where they go back in if Osimhen's available, because they're not actively urgently looking for a number 9 because they have some faith in Nicholas Jackson, but I think they know they probably need to upgrade in that position in the summer. I think it's something that they'll look at. So if Osimhen suddenly became available, you wonder whether, Tottenham are another team that needs, bolstering, and I think the situation with Ange Postecoglou is they've got themselves into a real mess with that, because Postecoglou has this specific style of play, and he's given them a list of players who he feels he needs to sort of improve that style at Tottenham. Now, if you're Daniel Levy, do you say to Ange Postecoglou, okay, we're going to back you, we're going to bring in this player in this final week to help you, 1, maybe 2, he probably wants 2, given the shortage and the situation they're in, but the club are thinking, well, we might sack this guy in 2 weeks. So they're either going to say to Postecoglou, okay, we back you in the market and here's your player, and he's got to come in and he's got to immediately improve things, or you fudge it and you say, okay, this is a player that we think as a club we want to bring in, and you're going to have to make it work. And if you do that, what message do you send to Ange Postecoglou then about your long-term future? Because you're basically saying you can't sign the players you want because we're not really sure whether we still want you.
And that's why January is such a hard window. I mean, even you've got a situation at City where they've got defensive injuries. They fast forward 2 defensive signings to January. You drop Gussanov in against Chelsea because you've got no other option. And instead of having a pre-season with his new teammates to kind of bed in gently, he's suddenly playing against Cole Palmer and Nicholas Jackson on his Premier League debut. And he has an absolute nightmare for 10 minutes and comes off after an hour. That's why the January window is so hard. And it's all well and good for fans to say, you need to do business, you need to do business. It is a dangerous window to do business in.
Just one final one on Chelsea. Nkunku. Obviously he's available. Does he give Chelsea the opportunity for leverage to get people in, because he's a player that people look at? Yeah,
he does. And, they're talking to Bayern about the winger Tell out there, and I can see a scenario where Nkunku's been raised in those conversations and whether they can get a deal for Tell, but I don't think that they want to sell him. So that's, I think, where Nkunku's been left in limbo, where he's quite keen to go out to Bayern, but if they can't find a deal for the Bayern player, then I don't see him just that being a straight sale to go out. So yeah, I mean, look, he's one of many players who are, have uncertain futures in the final days of this window, and I guess we'll see how it all plays out.